Today on the Idiot's Guide, we are talking about tantrums and meltdowns. And if you're in the market for property, I think a great advertisement slogan would be nice half-working jail. That's an option to consider. I'm your host, Adam Richardson, a.k.a. The Profit Hacker, and I'm joined by the man in charge, Mr. Joe Haslam. Welcome to the Idiot's Guide. All right. Well, I want to start this off by just saying that I think it's important that we qualify that there's some degree of being like, man, how do we even know? How does our one listener know that that we're even parents? You know, and so I have three kids. I have a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 7-year-old, and they all give me different flavors of meltdowns and tantrums. You know, it's not one size fits all sort of thing. How about you, Joe?
I've got, it depends on how you qualify them, but I've got 4 daughters. They are, now I got to think their ages: 24, turning 22, 19, and 16. So quite a lot. Now I say how you qualify them because I'm a foster parent. And so 2 of them were only ever foster. 2 of them are adopted. Mm-hmm. We just finalized the adoption on the 16-year-old.
Nice.
So that was a great thing to happen.
I think, you know, it's a real noble thing. You had mentioned, you know, when you sit here and you go like 24, how does that work as a kid? I don't know when you began that fostering relationship, but some of the things that we've had a conversation about kind of allude to the fact of, you know, that's going to be a lifelong relationship, a lifelong thing, and working with individuals. And so, you know, I'm glad that they have a home that they've been able to call a home and be part of that family, as opposed to it just being in a system per se. Yeah. And so, on the other side of it, I also, I've been a youth leader for a number of years. And so in the teenage sphere, you know, like youth leaders are kind of funny. I mean, it's weird because if your youth is typically associated with some religious organization, whatnot, or they do have some non-religious organizations, Boy Scouts and things that are out there. But when you say youth group, mostly that's an affiliation to some sort of religious organization. And in this, you'd be right. But that, I mean, honestly, at a youth group, like you're not going to recognize it as a church thing. So, you know, most of the time, youth groups full of pranks and picking on each other and just, you know, razzing and all sorts of fun.
A youth group, all it is it's allowing kids to find some kind of connection. Yep. They're not all part of that religious affiliation. It's just like here in Utah, it's predominantly LDS or Mormon. Mm-hmm. And even though that's the predominant, a lot of the kids that come to those youth events are not LDS. You know, they are either they're not religious, they're not affiliated with anything, or they're affiliated with a different church that doesn't have a youth organization. Mm-hmm. And so it's a place where their friends go. And so it's a nice common place where kids find that connection.
I think the cool thing about it, yeah, you say connection, it's a good place for them to be everything socially, you know, intelligent to socially awkward and everything in between. And it's a safe place for them to explore those, you know, technicalities as a teenager, you know, and trying to iron out some of those things and not have, you know, some of the abrasiveness that, you know, even public school can just chew you up and spit you right out in a millisecond. So it's good. In that sense, there's some good abilities to safely build character, I feel like, or, you know, some of your own self-value in those. Now, that's not to say that on the other side it's completely messed up, and there's a whole bunch of people who abuse that, including leaders. And
Yes,
you
they
know,
do.
in that case, then I'm sorry. You know, like it's a really terrible scenario, and you know, shame on those people who abuse that. But we're not talking about youth group abuse. No, we're not. What we are talking about is I've served in youth groups since about 2008. I was a youth leader actually when my son, who is now in youth, was born. I'd actually carried him to youth group for a few months until I just realized I was like, man, my baby is too distracting for this. They're not getting anything accomplished. Let's fake it. So I pulled the plug and I left. And but you know, I mean, like since then, it just kind of made it so that I was okay hanging out with weird, awkward, smelly young people. You know?
See, everyone gives teenagers a bad rap. So as foster parents, we focus on teenagers. And not only that, so I don't know how foster organizations work in other states. I believe they're similar. There are different levels within the foster organization for a normal foster home. So you have higher level, which is residential and different things like that. But for a regular home foster home, you have three levels. So there's level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 being the most stable kids, and level 3 being the most in need in a normal foster home. Above that is when you get into residential treatment and things like that. So my wife and I focus on level 3, teenagers, and not only that, level 3 teenage girls. And so these are some of the worst situations. Now, we're only allowed to have one gender of foster child in our home at a time. So that's why we have girls, because we had girls. And so that's just where we've gone. Not to say that girls are worse than boys at that age or level 3, but
I don't know.
It's
even in youth ministry, it wasn't, they each had their own.
Yeah, they're different in their struggles. But I enjoy it. I love working with teenagers. I can't stand little kids. They are stinky. They are smelly. They are sticky. they things come out of them that you have to clean up that I just cannot do. I will take teenagers any day of the week. And because they can think for themselves, you can see the growth, the learning, all the things that they have as they're hitting those teenage years, and all the positives, all the great things that come out of it. Yeah, there's a whole lot of negative. There are things where, you know, days are really bad. It's not always, you know, roses and sunshine, but you can't focus on the negative. You have to focus on the positive. And when you see that growth, when you see the improvement, when you see the development of these teenagers, there is nothing like it. And it is the most wonderful thing. So teenagers get a bad rap, but there is so much good in teenagers.
All right. That's fair. I think, you know, like we might, I don't want to necessarily just hang on the teenagers, even though, you know, like that's where, you know, I've like I said, youth leadership, you've specialized in that in fostering. And so there's a lot of, I feel like, knowledge there. Yeah. You know, but I'm going to reach a little bit further back because we've had conversations about this before, but I have a 7-year-old daughter. And so, you know, like when you're saying, oh, a teenage girl, I'm like, look, if that's anything, like if my daughter is anything like that when she's a teenager, I'm just going to kick her out. No, I won't do that. I won't do that, guys. But I'll probably find some way to, you know, I don't know. I have no idea other than please help, you know,
that is the parent condition. Is it? I don't know what I'm going to do.
A lot of, you know, like it's so funny because like I've got this list of tips that I'm going to try to extract from it, some morsels for our listener here. But literally it's not even this exact of a science. It's not. And, you know, it's just because every single person has a different nuance about how they're going about their life, and it's our job or responsibility as parents to help them navigate it, you know.
And that's the role. Is I think a lot of, and this may be in the advice list that you have, but a lot of parents start wanting to define their kids. And the reality is the role as parent is just to help them to thrive as themselves, not become a mini me, not become something that you are. It's to help them become what they can be, their individual idiosyncrasies, their specialties, their abilities. And it's just really encouraging and building that. And that's what helps them to become the best at what they are. And that's where, you know, being a parent, it's really just shepherding them along. It's making sure they don't fall off cliffs.
Sometimes you can use the word herding cats. That's a true statement.
Oh, trust me, for teenage daughters, yes, herding cats is a good definition. But you talked about science.
Yeah.
And there's no real science behind this. How to raise kids, there's no, specific process. And that is the case. But I do want to talk a little bit about the science comparison between a 2-year-old and a teenager, because there's a lot that's in there that people don't understand. So neurologically, as humans develop, the reason that humans are the way that they are, the reason why we can expand our civilization every generation, grow to the next generation, is oddly enough because of teenagers. Teenagers are the key to humanity, which is that's very
a lot
scary
of credit
thought.
You never want to give them. This is, hey guys, turn this portion of the episode off if you're a teenager. Just stop listening now.
Don't let your teenagers listen to this. And what happens is, back when humans were developing, or if you're religiously affiliated, back when humans were created, there was a process within all of that when a teenager reaches that age, so that puberty age, that developmental stage, there's actually a neurological regression back to the 2-year-old stage. And so that 2-year-old stage is the experimentation stage. So they're trying everything. They are experimenting with every possible thing around them. They will put everything in their mouth. They will run around naked. They will question everything about life. That's why they call it the terrible twos.
Yeah.
Now it slowly calms down as they get older, but it lasts for a good 5-6 years of this experimentation stage. What happens is when they hit those teenage years, is they regress to that experimentation so that they can learn and develop in a larger environment. And so they go back to the stage of they question everything and they experiment with anything they can.
I mean, does it have to be 2? Because my 7-year-old is doing this. Like, why?
Well,
why?
Your
Why?
7-year-old
Why?
would be equivalent of a 17-year-old.
All right, that's fair enough.
And so that's why a lot of parents have 6-year-olds going on 16.
Yeah. I mean, I would even bump that number higher.
And it's because they are essentially the same. The major difference is when they're 2, they need parents.
That's true.
They are in need. They're just experimenting. They're learning. They're developing. They're exploring the world around them. At 12, 13, when they reach that puberty age and they start to develop into more adult-like people, there's a disconnect between they've got adult bodies, but they've got 2-year-old brains. And so it's this idea that they are exploring the wider world around them. And if they learned growing up, taking this back to math, 2 + 2 = 4. That's what they learned as the best scenario when they were 4 years old. Well, and 2 + 2 being, clean your room and then they just do it nicely. That's 4. That's the answer. As a teenager, they're going to take that 2 plus 2 and they're going to try 5, which is throwing a hissy fit.
Yeah.
Or they're going to do, and that doesn't work. They get in trouble. So they try 2 plus 2 equals 6, which is pouting and starting to cry uncontrollably. Well, that didn't work either. And so that's what their brains are doing. They're literally trying out all these different scenarios, all these different responses to find out what is the correct answer for 2 plus 2. And it's the exact same thing that 2-year-olds do. The exact same thing.
Interesting.
And so talking about, kids, we're okay with that happening with a 2-year-old generally. But when we see a 12 or a 13-year-old doing it, all of a sudden we've got this, you shouldn't be doing this attitude. And so it's, and a lot of things that, Adam's got on his list here is, how to, some advice on, and all this advice doesn't necessarily come from us. Obviously we have a lot of years of experience in dealing with kids. We've made the mistakes so that you don't have to.
Oh, I'll give credit where credit's due, where I ripped the list off of,
but that's what it all comes down to. That's the science. That's the neurological science behind why teenagers and why kids are so difficult, is because they are actively learning about the world around them through trial and error.
Well, the good news is you don't have to become a mathematician in order to do this. So I'm going to give you, I'm going to throw one of these out here and we can kind of unpack it. But it's the first one. I actually kind of like this one, but I also have some pushback internally on this. And it probably because of my own parent experience that I kind of go like, okay. The phrase is, remember you are a parent and a friend. So, my generation or even the generation before that, no, you were not a friend. Like you were a parent, and that parent was to correct any bad behavior and not let you stay indoors ever. They kicked you out of the house until the street lamps came on, and then you had to come back inside. And other than that, if they saw you, you probably got swats. And yeah, like that's the generation I'm from. And, and it's even harsher. You go further back in that. Yeah. So this idea of friend, I can kind of make that connection in the sense that I am a fan of my kids. I'm a fan of what they believe in, the things they're passionate about, and very much like a friendship or that kind of a relationship is where that kind of can situate itself. But I also have to be the parent. So the parent is, like you said earlier, this shepherd, that protector. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of this, I don't know, dance per se of I'm going to kind of stay in this friend position because I feel like that's better in a peaceful. But when you screw up, you won't like me when I'm angry. Like the Hulk.
There you go. There's a lot to that. And yeah, the older generations, there was no friendship there. Yeah. One of my kids got a new caseworker, and I always do background checks and research on caseworkers because, I don't necessarily trust that the government's going to hire the best caseworkers.
Right.
And I was looking back on her Facebook page and looking at some of her older posts, and one of them was, remember, your kids are not your friends. You are their parent. And that was from someone who was roughly our age. And that's still very prevalent today, of that authoritarian rule of parenting.
And I've been known, even personally, to be like, growing up in certain circles, like we use the words first time obedience. And so when I say something, you obey right away. And so when my little girl does this, I'll talk to her and I'm like, hey, sweetie, like, when do we obey? She's like, first time, every time. So it's so freaking drilled into her that she doesn't care. She just recites it, and that's it. That's as far as it's made it. But that was kind of stemming from, trial and error for the first two kids. And then getting to this point where you can recite it because I know that that's not what it is. It's a negotiation every time I ask you to do something. And then that's more where it's at. But it stems from this, you will, because I'm dad and dad said so you will do it. Why? Because I said so.
See, I hate that phrase, because I said so. Because it works for little kids. Because they don't have the reasoning power yet to understand the logical processes of why should I be doing this, and so they do it because they trust you. They trust the parent to be correct, and so they will follow it. And so for younger kids, yes, that's great. But as they get older, they start to question, why should I trust my parent? Why should I do what my parent is saying? And that's a hard question to answer.
If I do that on ask my son to do something, 15 years old, it's a different situation. It'll ask the why, and I have to have an answer. I have to have a legit one. I can't use because I said so, because he's like, that's bull.
Exactly.
But he'll, if the other side of it is I know his progression in his mind, because I've asked him so many times to do certain things or been involved, interacted with him. And in those interactions, he'll turn around and be like, okay, I need you to get up. I need you to take care of this, this, and this. Okay. And then I'll check back with him to wake him up again because he hasn't gotten up. And then he's going to come back and be like, what did you want me to do? And, and then I'm going to go back over it again. And so he's finally awake. I go back over. He does the first thing because they only heard that. And then he has to go back and he'll do and then I'll say the other two again. And then he'll do the last thing and forget what he was the middle one. And so it's this hand holding through the whole repetition of it that I've even gotten to the point where I'm like, I'm going to piecemeal this, like one thing at a time, dude. Like, this is all I can do is first wake up. Then we'll get step 2 when I see you vertical.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, it's, and that I think is be the friend part. Kind of have that understanding of where they're coming from and just kind of that nicer relationship, you know, it's that more forgiving, in religious circles, we talk about justice versus mercy. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the difference. The parent is the justice and the friend is the mercy. And so being able to exhibit both of those as that parent is really important, and being able to talk to them in that way.
I think they're, like that's, I think it's a good balance. I think it's rare that, any parent really has it down. Every once in a while, like you have a friend who you're like, man, your mom was so cool, And I want to say that my wife, she's, in certain circumstances, she seems like she's kind of aiming in that direction, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. I don't think you're gonna hit it, because like it's really hard for parents to hit that. Like,
so just to give everyone an understanding, so being foster parents, we've been foster parents for a long time. And you have to go through an initial 24 hours of training. So it's over an entire month, 3 hours each session. So 8 sessions, I think. Mm-hmm. Plus, in order to be level 3, you have to go through an additional 8 hours of training. And then we have to do an additional 16 hours of training every year to renew our license. And this is all in addition to the research that I do on neurocognitive development and the studies that I did in college on human development. So I've done a lot of training when it comes to this stuff. And
he knows stuff, guys.
And
when we say all the things, we mean all the things.
There is absolutely no way I am going to get this right every time.
Yeah.
As much training as you have. And, again, you have to kind of forgive yourself as a parent, but that's also a great teaching moment for kids, is being able to say, I made a mistake. Can you forgive me? To your kids. And for them to recognize that it's okay to make a mistake helps them to learn, and it builds that relationship. So one thing that we have to do, in addition to all this training, before we're allowed to adopt a kid, we have to do additional trust-based relational intervention, TBRI training. And that's what a lot of it talks about, is developing that trust, and so that you can intervene in their behaviors and help them to develop new and better reactions to the world around them.
I think the next one is kind of a mesh of a few of these. They all kind of go together, in my opinion. So I'm gonna list them off. They have them individually written out here, but it's establish dependable together time, parent actively and appropriately, try to be there after school, and keep your high standards. So some of that I'm going to push back. I mean, I grew up as a latchkey kid, so being there right after school, I'm there for my kids because I'm their ride. My kids don't go to a school right down the street. Well, my son does, my oldest does, but the other two are across town, so I have to take them to school and pick them up, and that puts me at home usually during those hours, and I can say that I love it and I hate it at the same time, because all of them want me, like when I pick up my other two younger kids, like I'll get an update on the car ride. I'm like, how's this? What's this? How's this? What was for lunch today? Did you have any papers from your teacher? And it's like, one's going into 7th grade, so he's going to be a little bit more teenagery here soon. So he's going to be like, nothing. Like, but you were at school all day. What happened? Nothing. Be like, you're so angry, so angsty.
I've got a fun with that one. So my 19-year-old. So I make it a point to take my kids to school every morning and take them home. Now, I know not everyone can do that. I have the ability to do it. If you can get some family member to do it, even if it's a aunt or uncle or something like that, it makes a world of difference to just that few minutes of being in the car makes a big difference. But so I would take her home from school and I asked her, what'd you learn in school today? Nothing. So I started, and it's just habit to ask that. So I started saying, let me rephrase that. What did your teachers talk about in class today? Obviously you didn't learn anything, but what did you talk about in class today?
Yeah. I think that, that like the together time and the trying to be there after school can kind of be a both, but I don't want that to be like, well, I pick you up every day from school, so isn't that enough? I can check that parenting box off, like, nope, no. Together time's like, hey, you guys want to play a card game, and sit there and talk and say, how's life? Here's a jar of lemonade. I don't know if we're at the 50s, but like, yeah. Make it, it's an intentional moment where you are focused on them and who they are, what they're doing, the things that they're questioning. That's what it is. I would say, when it comes to dependable, is that time that you're doing that, is it dependable because it's intentional, or is it dependable because you have an alarm clock that goes off that says you're supposed to do this?
Yeah. And that's something, when you've got teenagers, it is really, really difficult to do that one-on-one.
Yes.
Because they just don't want it. Now, again, with my 19-year-old, she did not have very good parental figures throughout her life. And so we started doing daddy-daughter dates. And she thought that was the best thing in the world. She'd never had a dad that was so involved in her life to take her on daddy-daughter dates. And she was 18 or 17 years old when she moved in. And so through all of her life, she never had a dad that was that involved to take her on daddy-daughter dates. So that worked really, really well with her. And it was great. My other daughter, my 16-year-old, she does not have that good of relationship with authority figures. And so if you try to talk to her one-on-one, it just doesn't work. It's not the way that she communicates. But as an example, last night, so she loves, going on YouTube and watching the people play video games, and she likes games. She just doesn't like playing the games. So like,
both my boys like doing that. They'll watch that. Well, I mean, they like playing video games too, but yeah.
And so last night she's like, the other day we were doing something and she needed help with a video game, that I had been playing for a while. And so she had her user on it. And so she's playing the game and she needed help on it. So I start helping her, and I realized how much she enjoyed watching me play the game, because I realized, oh, this is what she's doing all the time. And so even though I'm playing the video game, she's sitting there next to me, just enjoying the time. And so last night we spent 2, maybe 3 hours playing this video game, and she's just sitting there, she's got her phone, she's doing her Snapchat, but she's asking about the game. She's watching the game as I'm playing it. And it's just, she starts talking about different things, and it's a way for her to feel comfortable and open up without that direct communication. And that's really what it is by spending time with them, they are able to open up, but it doesn't always have to be the exact same way.
Well, and I think that leads to the next one that it really stood out to me was keep the lines of communication humming. So a lot of times I can notice a dip in my reaction time and my son's reaction time, my 15-year-old, if we're not communicating well. If the only interaction I get is struggling to get him out of bed and give him orders to do things, if that is the gist of our conversations, then the relationship kind of isn't very strong at that point. It's just kind of the normal single answer teenager reluctantly obeying what I've asked him to do. And so I try to make sure I'm in tune with that as that goes on. There's a couple other ones that are around here though, but it's like continue family meeting and make it a high priority to eat meals together. I think what you're talking about and it's all kind of that central theme of communication humming, and making it so that it's safe to be able to share everything that's going on. So that, if there's a concern over something, to go like, hey, is it okay? Can I talk to you for a second over here? It doesn't have to be like, all right, family, gather around. Everyone, let's hear our problems together. We solve together. We stay together. Guys, there are things in everybody's lives that are in different ways. And my 15-year-old's life is way different than my 7-year-old's life. And I don't want either of those to, well, my 15-year-old doesn't care what, my 7-year-old's life is. He's like, as long as you're fed and sleeping, we're good, and but he's got navigating friendships and navigating relationships and, too much, getting into, he watches anime shows and, getting into whatever's socially cool or hip or infesting in our society right now. And so it's saying that I'm not being defiant. I'm not being defiant in this kind of stuff. It's saying, hey man, that's interesting. I probably wouldn't do it personally, but hey, to each his own, man. How does that feel? And let them express themselves. And that's, I think, what it means by, keeping the communication humming.
Yeah. We have a rule in our house. We only have one rule in the house. And that is, and again, our situation is different than most because we're dealing with kids who have a lot of trauma in their past. And all the things that we're talking about work for us. But the key is finding something that works for your family.
Yep.
What works for you? Sometimes it's that very structured family environment, meetings. And I've seen that work in certain families. And that works really well for them. Others, it's a more laid back. In our household, we're really laid back because the kids that come into our home have a lot of this trauma background. Mm-hmm. And so we actually don't even have chores for the kids because they've never had a childhood. And so they've had to struggle for every day of their lives just to survive. And so that was one thing that we consciously made a choice to do was they're not going to have chores here so that they don't have to worry about that work and effort. They still have to do their homework. They have to clean their room. But no, like household chores, they don't have to do the dishes or things like that unless they want to. They can earn money if they want to do it, but.
Oh, that's fine. That's cool. That's my boys are both that way. They're now like he's 12, but he's almost 13. So he's much more like a teenager at this point. Yeah. And he takes care of my 7-year-old this summer, and his 15-year-old brother quit. He gave up, and he's like, screw this. I can't watch her. I don't have the patience. I'm like, well, that just means I'm going to ask you to do it, and I'm not paying you anymore. So, I was like, it was a nice gesture for me to pay, and that's what your brother's going to get is all of it now, instead of you getting some and he getting some. Yeah. So that's how we've split it. We had it split. Now he gets $50 a week for watching my daughter. And I was like, that's like, I know collectively over a month, that's kind of a high ticket. And everyone's like, and our one listener's going, oh my gosh, that's a lot for a kid, a 12-year-old. And I'm like, you're right, it is. Childcare is more like $800 to $900 a month for that, for anything decent.
But they're learning, what it takes to earn money. They're learning how to use money.
Yeah.
That really starts at the younger you can do that, the better it is. Our 19-year-old, she's just starting to get money. She's got some mental disabilities and some other things that she gets Social Security benefits because of how late in life she was adopted. But so she gets those benefits to help her because she can't really hold down a job. It was the first time she's ever had really money. And so she spends it like you would not believe. Now she's a lot better than she used to be. But the younger they learn that, but our 16-year-old, she's been in our home since she was 12. And, she learned money very early on in our home, and she's great with money, Yeah. And so it's those differences, starting that out young. But, in our house, we don't really have chores. And we have one rule in the house, and that is 100% open and honest. And that's all we ask. Mm-hmm. If they do something stupid, we just ask them to tell us. There are no punishments in our house. Now, there's a big difference between punishment and discipline.
Yeah.
So we talk to them about what they could have done better if they do something stupid. But there's no punishment. They're not going to get grounded. They're not going to get timeout. They're not going to get, extra chores. They don't get those things. Mm-hmm. We talk to them about what is a better way to do this, but 100% open and honest. They talk to us about everything. They talk to us literally about everything that happens. Yeah. Now, obviously they're teenagers, so I shouldn't say everything that happens because they're going to hold back. We know when they're lying to us because they're not very good at it. But that's the rule, is that if you tell us about it, then everything's good.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry or be afraid of authority or parents because it's just, you told us about it. You're open, you're honest, you're forthcoming.
I think there's a different kind of almost like, I want to say parenting currency that I do with my oldest versus my youngest. My youngest, like it's playing with friends. You don't get to go play with friends if you don't do this, or you don't get to watch TV for a little while, and you need to make sure you take care of this before And so they're like, it's task oriented. Take care of this stuff, or if you did something wrong, got to take a break. You get normal like 7-year-old discipline. You got to have those consequences. Right. With my 15-year-old, it's a different currency. However, it's usually done in kind of a logical negotiation, where it's, hey, if you want this, this is how you get there, and this morning for me, he wants to go over to his friend's house, and he's like, okay, if you, if as soon as you're ready, like I'm ready to go, can we do this? I got in from a trip at 10:30 last night. So my car's covered in bug stuff, and it was a camping trip. So all the gear was still in the vehicle. And I'm like, we're not moving until that gear is pulled out of my vehicle and all that stuff is put away. Like, I'm not just going to leave it laying out. And so like And I was like, and shower, please. Like, your friends don't want to be friends with you until this happens. Anyway, so like he got it in gear, and like he's like led the charge. As soon as he was done showering, he comes up and he's like, hey, to his brother and sister, he's like, can I get your help? I need to go take care of this vehicle, and I'm like, goodness, where is this kid? He was motivated. He had a goal, and he wanted to get there, and he just knocked it out of the park. It was excellent. So I mean, like that it's a different currency than my 7-year-old. Well,
and I think a lot of the things that we're talking about here is, I call it active parenting or deliberate parenting.
Yeah.
Because every choice that you make is deliberate. It's active. It's not the reaction where something happens and you immediately react.
Yeah.
It's the deliberate thinking ahead, proactively parenting. And I think that makes the big difference.
I think with the proactive and like that's one of the ones for the actively and appropriately, but also, encouraging good self-care. And I think in part of that is kids and tech in common spaces. So disappearing to your room with a computer it can cause risks. Okay. Everybody, all the parents are going, I don't know. Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. I know I'm right. I know I'm absolutely right. But also in this, like the self-care tech, tech responsibility, I guess. Let's phrase it that instead of some central command in the middle of your house. Like, just be responsible with it, not stupid. Don't push your child or your teen into independence before they're ready.
And don't hold them back from their independence.
Yeah.
If they're ready for more.
Yeah. I think one of the this was one that was thrown in on the 12 tips. This is 13. Stay connected even as they move out into the world. Yeah. So knowing that, like, hey man, like if I'm going to send you down this dark cave, but I'm sending you with a rope that's attached to me, so that if you need help, just give it a little tug and I will pull you up and I'll make sure that you're safe, and that, like, I think that when they're trying to get their feet wet in different things. Last week, I picked him up. So he's 15. He's like, I could get my learner's permit. I was like, yeah, but you can't pass a test without studying. So there's that. But he's all motivated. I was like, all right. So I went to go pick him up out by his, he's doing a rock climbing course right now. And as I picked him up, I got out of the driver's seat and sat in the passenger seat. And I'm like, we're not far from home, but you better get going. And so he gets in and he's just nervous. Like, this is the first thing I've never done this. And it was wonky and disorganized, and gas pedal, brake pedal, gas pedal, overturning and then overcorrecting the turn. And I was like, this is beautiful. But, about the only like downside, I guess, is the fact that, like, I had to learn on a manual transmission. And like, it's an extra special, like, you get a gold star if you can drive a manual, and it doesn't even exist anymore. Like, literally, you can't get it.
I honestly don't mind that.
I think the Broncos, I think they have a manual transmission option, but it's a weird hybrid. It's not an actual manual. Neither here nor there. But the point of this is, I'm not here to push my kid beyond themselves and beyond into some sort of level of independence that I'm envisioning. I'm also here to make sure that they take care of themselves and that they're proud of themselves and that they know that I am proud of them,
Yeah. And just a quick shout out. I know we're going a little long on this one, but
okay.
That last point really is important. So again, I'm in the foster world. There are a lot of kids that go into foster care that age out of the system. They turn 18, they've never been adopted, and they don't have that lifeline. They don't have that connection. And so anyone listening to this, if you feel comfortable being that lifeline, being that person that can just be a help for them, there are mentorship programs with just about any foster organization throughout the U.S.
And if not, the school districts have those. They offer those things that like. There's religious organizations that offer those. I mean, it is everywhere.
Reach out even if you're not comfortable being a foster parent, where they're coming into your home or anything like that. Being that person that can give the advice. Again, we're the idiots here giving the advice because we've been down this road probably further along than you have. You can be that guiding idiot for an 18-year-old who doesn't know how to get an oil change for their car, who doesn't know how to get a driver's license, who doesn't know how to write a resume. All these things that we
thought
take
you were
for
going to say
granted.
check. I was like, those don't exist.
Yeah. How to get a bank account.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them don't have bank accounts when they age out of the system.
Yeah.
These things, you don't necessarily have to have them in your home, but find a way, if you're comfortable with it, to reach out and be that lifeline, because these kids need it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess at that point they're adults, but they're kids. They need that help. They need that support. And that's what makes a good parent, is just being for them long term.
Well, in the sphere and realm of idiocy, I'm going to finish it off by telling you a little bit of a story. Some high school seniors in Maryland, Fort Meade area, they pranked a school by listing it on Zillow as a nice half-working jail. So this was originally HuffPost.com, an article by David Moy. He grabbed it from some of the local news in Fort Meade area. But the students, so they listed this on Zillow. I don't even know how it made it to Zillow and how Zillow got this full posting.
AI.
Like, good. But they listed it for $42,069. Like, this is a high school. Like, how big is this high school? Or how small is this high school?
Yeah, no kidding.
Because that's like maybe the foyer of any school that I know.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so at this, like the listing, there was a lot. It was eventually removed, but basically some more of the things that were advertised were, complimentary trash scented air freshener and water issues, referring to it as the nice half working jail, with all 15 bathrooms come with sewage issues and dangerous unfinished sections that could cost you your life. So I'm like, a neighborhood full of rodents. And so anyway, like this was a big deal in the neighborhood. Like the local news just loved it. Like just it lit up for a little while. It drew the interest of local individuals who'd be like, I wonder what I could do with that property right there. But I guess what had happened is like this was more of a one-up from a couple years prior. Some seniors decided that they were going to just put a for sale sign in front of the high school. So they're like, that's nothing. Like, check these marketing slogans out. Come on, rodent infested neighborhood,
Oh man. Now though, that is a senior prank. That is good.
So no one was hurt, no property was damaged, and everyone was laughing. So in the sphere, or in this realm of what we do, I'd like to just let you know we've reached the end of our podcast episode, and I hope that that little nice gesture at the end of mentioning that if you were in the market for a nice half-working jail, there's one in Fort Meade, Maryland. But I'm going to try this again. I summed it up a little bit better, but I have no idea how it's going to flow into things. But life's too short. So keep laughing, keep learning, and remember, idiots have way more fun.
Check your shoes.